criminalization of missing and dozens and dozens, right, becomes important. That was a very controversial and angry statement, but it came from a place of just rage. So, never negotiate away Section 7, no matter what fear tactics, fear-mongering, and whatever moral panic they impose, because you need the right to your own body. And you're going to need the right to your own body in the future as we move forward. So, you're going to hear a lot about, I don't know if I'll go on that rant or not, but you're going to hear a lot about this idea of criminalizing buyers. That's the flavor of the week. That is something that the Harper government may impose as an alternative, because we were able to use the charter to say that those pieces of legislation were unconstitutional, but they're like, either they make sex work illegal so that their enforcement is constitutional, or they across the board criminalize the buyers. So, an issue with, sorry, wrong slide. Yeah, no, there. The issue with criminalizing purchase is the same thing that we saw with prohibition. When you criminalize a product or a service, who do you think is best positioned to link a buyer with a product or a service? Come on, sociologists. Organized crime, right? They link people with illegal services and illegal products. So if we go ahead with this idea of criminalizing buyers, you create a broker system within the industry that's not necessarily, we don't have the pimp in the corner and managing, like some people do it that way, but with the advent of IT, you can put on your website and work independently. You don't need to be under the claws of organized crime. But if we criminalize buyers across the board, organized crime will be the gateway linking the buyer with the provider, and that's an instance that we don't want. We don't want. So I would like you guys to support sex worker control of the industry, support sex worker development of, occupational health and safety guidelines, trade secrets, like what Velvet was talking about, was an attempt to standardize some practices in the industry, across the industry. Also support that idea of human and labor laws being applied to the sex industry in ways that sex workers support and advocate for. And because, I know you guys are 3, right? You're 3rd year? So are you guys 3rd year? 4th year? What? You don't know? He's like it? Okay. But you guys can do practicums in various organizations. You guys can write papers, because no matter what discipline you're in, you can have actually analysis on sex work. You can be in economics, you can be in legal, you can be in women's studies, you can be in gender studies, you can be working on anti-oppression stuff, you can be in sociology or crim or whatever. It's an interdisciplinary topic. So the more you learn and know about the topic, the better. And it's like, come to a march, volunteer, and get involved in the community so that you can decide for yourself how you feel about the industry and then act accordingly. Personally, absolutely, like I said, get involved. You're going to hear a lot of shit. Think about power. Think about who's able to negotiate power in situations where you hear about let's criminalize buyers, let's not. Think about who benefits from the way things are. Think about who benefits from the way things are proposed. Think about whose voice is missing, who is speaking, who's always speaking, right? Think about those things. Critically evaluate what you hear. You guys are the intelligentsia, budding intelligentsia, so my hope's with you, right? The other piece that we always share is not to be involved in hate speech or hate activities. There were times when students would drive down on strolls, and when we had pennies, would throw pennies at sex workers, right? And engage in jokes and all kinds of stuff, and that supports predation and violence against sex workers, because you're demonstrating stigma, you're outing them. It's the scarlet letter. You're saying they're subhuman, they're not worthy, right? Not that any of you in here would ever do that. But the way the general public treats sex workers is something that they talk about often. And it's not the violence from clients so much, or the violence from members of organized crime, if it's applicable, but it's how Joe Q. Public and Jane Q. Public treats them. That's what sticks with them, and that's what they remember. So we can decide that sex workers fall within our protective potential. We can push our legislators to decide that sex workers fall within the protective potential of law enforcement, of law, of humanity, of all of that stuff. We can make those decisions because we wake up and we create our world every day. Okay? So, end whorephobia.
How's everyone doing? You need to get up and stretch? I do. Alright. Okay, it's great to be here. Again, this is my 4th year doing this panel, so always a shout out to Jason, thanking you for the opportunity to come and speak and be a part of the panel of my peers. Velvet just left the room, but totally honored to always share stage with Velvet Steele, who is like a powerhouse of empowering and inspiring sex-positive activism in her gorgeous pinkness. And then Raven Bowen, who is near and dear to my heart. She's one of my mentors. And so it's full circle here to be presenting with you, so total respect. So, I'm Matthew Taylor, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about the work I do with the Hustle program. So we're going to talk a little bit about the male experience in sex work. So this is our guy. He's on the front of the brochures that you will see. He is actually, the artist who drew him is Ken Foster, and he's a bit of a local legend in the downtown east side. He's a great sort of ghetto street artist, and as you can see, his work is amazing. This is done on mediums that he finds in the alleyway. So this was done on a piece of particle board, and it's done with pastels. I actually own this piece. I actually bought it from a friend who bought it from him directly. But he sells his stuff for $5, $10. I see some nodding that maybe somebody knows him or has seen his work. Maybe you see superimposed face of a DJ who's on the decks with a big arm. That's him. So that's his work, and he's incredible. So always giving a shout out to him and keeping it real. Okay, so here we go. How you survive this life everyday hustle. So it's a pretty cool acronym. I didn't come up with it, I have to say. Early on in the program, which I'll get into, and a little bit about my experience as well in the presentation. Early on, I was trolling Urban Online Dictionary. Has anyone been on the Urban Online Dictionary? Right? Pretty cool. Search your name. Very bizarre. If you look up your name, lots of interesting interpretations of what your name means. Anyway, how you survive this life every day came up for Hustle, and I thought it was amazing, and it really spoke to the work that we were doing in the experience. And if you add the R on the end, it's how you survive this life every day resourcefully. So apparently Hustle's a very crafty bunch. So here's a little bit of the background of the Hustle program. So our mission, this Prezi is a little bit like a roller coaster ride. I'm always like, whoa, what on your seats, here we go. You ever seen SCTV? Might be a little bit before your time with the old. Okay, so the mission is pretty straightforward. We're an outreach and support program for self-identified men in the sex industry, and we also identify and support the needs of experiential youth and community. When we talk about self-identified, we're talking about individuals who choose to identify as male along the spectrum, the gender variant spectrum. So it's an inclusive term, and identifying and supporting the needs of it should be experiential, not experimental. That's a typo. I had somebody revise my presentation. Experiential youth. We call them experiential youth because we talk their language. Lots of youth don't consider themselves exploited, right? And lots of them are saying they're getting their needs met. It's a mutual exchange. They're exchanging sexual services for the purposes of whatever it is, and they may not consider themselves exploited. So when we talk to youth, we're talking on their terms and in their language. The objective is simple. We want to increase the health and safety of men in the sex industry and youth that are at risk of sexual exploitation. And we do this as much as we possibly can through a harm reduction, non-judgmental support, and health promotion lens. It's interesting, I was at a training this morning, a sex work sensitivity training, and we had a little bit of a discussion around non-judgmental. It's really interesting. You know, it's really easy, I think, for people to add lip service. Oh, non-judgmental approach, non-judgmental, empowering approach, right? Non-judgmental. I think it's a bit of a disservice to talk about non-judgmental. We all have judgments, right? And it's about being aware of judgments and working really hard to suspend the judgments that we have in order to meet the needs of the person that we're in the moment with. And so I think it's just important to talk about language is a big deal. The history of the program, it's co-founded by two experiential men in 2007. I'm one of those men, and I am experiential. And a little bit about my experience. I entered sex work late. I was in my late 20s, and I left in my mid-30s. I come from a really good home and a really good upbringing. I continue to have a family that loves me, even if they don't completely understand my choices. They love me nonetheless. When I decided to exit, I went to a program at Peers Vancouver that Raven spoke about, and it's here. It was the first home for Hustle. Peers Vancouver was the exiting organization for sex workers in the downtown east side. And it was an all-inclusive program, but it was largely modeled through a female lens. So the majority of sex workers at the organization and in programs were female. So I met another male in the program, and his experience was quite different than my experience. He entered a lot earlier. The reason that he made the choices he did were a little bit different than mine. And so the two of us together recognized a real need to create a program that was specific to men in the industry and all the different experiences that go along with that. I entered the industry, it was part of my searching for an identity. I'd always struggled with my sexual identity growing up being gay, and so I was always searching for an identity, searching for a place to belong, validation, desire, all of these things. And so that was one of the reasons, that was a big motivator for me to get involved. And so I share that with you, just to let you know, and just to highlight the fact that there are so many different realities out there for reasons why people get into sex work, right? Reasons why guys are in sex work, why self-identified men or women are in sex work. It's all different, right? There's no one reality that best fits. So that's why I share that with you. So we're one of only, now I Google this often just to make sure, we're one of only 2 male sex work specific programs that I know of in BC and only 3 Canada-wide. So the Hustle program is that Health Initiative for Men. Health Initiative for Men is a gay men's health organization in Vancouver. And gay men is a broad term to include other men who have sex with men as well. So it's a good fit for us. We were originally a program at Peers Vancouver, as I spoke to you about. Other programs in BC, there's the Boys R Us program, which is a drop-in dinner program for male and trans sex workers in the west end of Vancouver through Vancouver Coastal Health, and we're partnered with that program. And the other program in Canada that we know of is Rezo in Montreal, and it's a Katie program, Katie Health, and they have a sex work, male and trans sex work support program for outreach and drop-in as well. So only 3. There's lots of organizing, lots of movement, lots of support across Canada for sex workers, but these I'm talking specifically for men in the industry. Accountability. So a big part of the Hustle program is to remain accountable in the community. First to our partners, to our allies, but foremost to those that we're serving. So the men in the industry, the self-identified men in the industry, and the youth that we're engaging with. So to do that, we have a community allies table. It's like a steering committee, and what it is it's a group of the stakeholders in community that we work with, partners, those that have expertise in certain areas, and we bring them together always to bounce ideas off of when we're developing, when we're implementing programs and services within Hustle to make sure that we're meeting the needs and to remain accountable. And this is a list of the members of that allies group. So Hustle Ourselves, the Boys R Us program, I talked about the STOP, Seek and Treat for the Prevention of HIV and AIDS Nurses at BCH PACE Society. We talked about SWAN, Supporting Women's Alternative Network, Indoor, Off-Street, Migrant Workers, peer navigators, who are peers that are living with HIV, that are helping other folks who are HIV navigate the system. The co-founder, so that other gentleman I spoke about, he's back in the fold and he's an ally. Safe Online Outreach Society, SOLOS, HIM Health Initiative for Men, and Family Services of Greater Vancouver. So a wide range of allies so that we remain accountable. We couldn't do what we do without being heavily partnered in community. So the cornerstone of the Hustle program is building relationships, right, and meeting guys and meeting youth where they're at. But it's also about support and partnerships in the community with our allies and our other supports. So sex worker supports, youth services, social service, health authorities, enforcement, and government ministries. As much as we possibly can, we partner with them to meet their needs as best as we can. Funding. Always a chance to shout out to our funders. Yay, funders! I mean, it's always a dance, and you know, it's always a grab and a climb to find those dollars and continue to offer the services, the most critical services. Mac AIDS is a nice big logo because that's one of our newer funders. Yay, Elton John! And that's very cool. And they funded a portion of our outreach as well as Vancouver Coastal Health and the City of Vancouver. So as you can see, there's some major players that are at the table that recognize the needs and that are supporting the work that we do, which is great. Whee! We're doing a timeline now. You'll like this. Oh, much cleaner. Remember the old timeline? So 2007 was the implementation of the Hustle program, and as I said, we actually have, Raven actually wrote the original proposal for the Hustle program. She didn't co-wrote it. One sentence that I had made it into that baby. And that's fine, because I had no idea how to write a proposal. And so she got us dollars. And actually, the first funding we got was through the CKNW Orphans Fund. So they were really interested in our exploited youth or youth at risk piece, as well as, so it was kind of like a way in for us to get the funding that we got, which was very cool. And again, that was, so that was the implementation in 2007. Lots of stuff was going on in 2007. Dr. Stu McIntyre had wrote a report under the radar of the sexual exploitation of young men. It was some of the first research that was done in Western Canada around men in the industry and young guys who are exploited. And recommendations at the end of that report pointed to the need for specific services for guys in the industry, you know, to have a program that is designed and delivered by experiential guys, you know, so we really have to be there, done that, and can relay quality. So implementation. Living in community was big. At that time, and you've heard about living in community from Raven and Velvet, and there was recommendations again that came out of that work that was, you know, that was like pointing to supports housing, mental health, you know, outreach, more dollars for the on the ground work. 2008. Hustle was at Pierce Vancouver, and we got a little piece of funding to create the Experiential Youth Mentorship Program. So what we were able to do was we were able to take a youth who had made some change and had moved forward in their life, and bring them in, mentor them so that they could deliver outreach back into the community with their peers, which was a huge success. And we continue to see the success of the relationships that were formed there. So again, that relatability quality. 2009, the Assistant Deputy Minister's Grant gave Pierce Vancouver a little chunk of money to do Think Again, and I won't show it now, it's not actually embedded, but what it basically was all about youth services in Vancouver. So it had vignettes and it had stories and anecdotes about some youth that were exploited and that were engaging in the exchange of sexual services, and then talked about all the different supports in the community for them, from law enforcement to youth services to you know, exiting sex work to outreach. So it was a really powerful video. So that was 2009. 2010. Because of the work I was doing with Hustle at Pierce Vancouver, I was able to transition to become the Director of Programs and Services for Pierce, which was a first for the organization, and it was controversial because here was a male in the role providing services, you know, to an organization that had largely been through a female lens, and yet it just seemed like a natural fit because Hustle was the male version of the exiting program there. We'd already integrated, so it was, you know, it was self-identified men and women working together, life skills, building relationships. So it just was a natural fit, and it was personal growth for me. It was huge. In 2011, we had seen over the years since Hustle had started, we had seen a real decrease, and we'll talk about this in a few slides, a real decrease in street presence of sex work and a real increase in online activity. So with a forward-thinking board of directors and an executive director, we just jumped online. We crafted some draft policy and procedure to inform the work that we were doing. We jumped online and started creating profiles on social networking and dating sites. And we continue to do that at HIM, and it's a huge piece of the work that we do. Being at Health Initiative for Men has allowed us to broaden our reach, and not just when we were at Peers Vancouver, we were very survival-based for good reason. That was the lens for the organization, was predominantly survival. At HIM, we were allowed to broaden our scope, reach more men who have sex with men, and then really allow guys and youth to come and identify for themselves who they were, who they are, and what their needs are, and not sort of label them and silo them like a lot of other organizations tend to do with their lens. So that was an outreach, and we'll talk a bit more about that too. So 2012, well, what am I doing? So in 2011, something else happened. The government, in their infinite wisdom, decided to change. Well, this had been happening for years, but it reached BC. They decided to change the way they deliver employment services, and they really restructured it to now what you probably see out is employment service centers, so one-stop shops. So you come in, you get skilled, you get a job, you move on. Right? So it's for people who are employable, and it really is not a model that works for any marginalized or barrier population. So sex workers being one of those, they really cut off. It was called Bridging to Employment programs that were so successful, and they just cut off all the Bridging to Employment programs, and so it was a huge gap left in services for marginalized populations, specifically for sex workers. Which is unfortunate. I'll talk a bit about some of the work we're doing to fill in that gap in a little bit though. That necessitated I went into program preservation mode at that time, and I'm like, oh my God, Hustle has to survive and thrive. How are we going to do this? It's such a specific service. And so I took a proposal and I took my butt over to Health Initiative for Men. We were already partnering with them, and I sat down with the ED and I said, this is the program, this is the situation at Peers, this is the program that we've got, here's the funding, here are the relationships we have built, here's the crucial services that we offer. What, you know, is there a place for us at HIM? And absolutely there was, and within a few months we were, you know, making the move to transition, and formally did, and became a program at 2012. So it was very sad and unfortunate that Peers closed, but Hustle has landed very well at HIM, and we continue to develop and to integrate with HIM in an awesome way. And 2013, as you can see, is just integration, and 2014 isn't on the map there. I have to add that too. Here's what we do in a nutshell. The projects under the Hustle program include the most important is outreach. And like I talked about, street reach, always our philosophy to meet people where they're at. In other words, we come to you. A big reality, a main reality for a lot of guys that are working is isolation, right? I mean, you talk about men in society in general, and you have that shaming and that stigma around men don't feel, men don't access services, men don't ask for help, and that's very pervasive. You add to those layers of maybe, you know, you're having identity confusion, maybe you're confused about your sexuality, maybe you're shamed about all these pieces, then you engage in sex work for a variety of reasons, maybe there's shame around that. You add some layers for some people that may include mental health issues, addiction, housing, all of those different things, and then it's no wonder why guys are going to isolate and they're not going to reach out for services, so we go to them, right, as much as we possibly can. It's evolving. Recently, we just decided that we were going to restructure Street Reach to look more like focusing our efforts on drop-ins, where the guys and the youth are actually coming. So we have a base of operation. We've always been partnered with them, but we're going to focus less on actually doing the beat on street. Reason being is we're seeing hardly any guys who are actually working. We're seeing lots of youth. Youth have a lot of services out there. They have a lot of outreach services already, and we're seeing a lot of homeless or a lot of street life. Right, but we need to be, you know, mindful of our mandate and who we're trying to reach. So, still engage the survival population in drop-ins, but more engaging online. more engaging online, really. And we just got a piece of funding from the Ministry of Justice to fund NetReach specifically, because NetReach has been off the side of our desk and with existing resources. We just decided to do it, and it hasn't been funded specifically or evaluated. So this year we'll be able to do that. What we do is we offer, so instead, and also too, as well as drop-ins, home visits, right? So really meeting the guys and the youth where they're at and saying, hey, what do you need in your home? And we use the term home broadly. Home could be an SRO, it could be an apartment, it could be a van, it could be a tent in the park, right? Wherever you are, what do you need to make your situation in your home as healthy and as comfortable as possible? So we're really going to beef up that service, which has already got traction. We just started offering that. Things with supports and referrals, assistant with housing and ID. ID is huge. A set of ID probably costs $50, if that, to get somebody a set of ID, but it changes somebody's world, right? All of a sudden they're a person again, they're legitimate, and you don't know the hassle that people get when they don't have a piece of ID, right? Or the police, barriers to any kind of supports and services. I remember back in the day, I used to carry around a photocopy, and the photocopy was dog-eared and it was falling apart, but it was my only connection to my identity, so it was ID is huge. Harm reduction, non-judgmental support, again, suspending the judgments. Harm reduction being the needle exchange and the safe sex, and all the things that go around with making somebody's, whatever they're doing as healthy and as safe as possible. Reliable and consistent. I think one of the success, can you still hear me? Did that fall up?
Yeah, that's weird.
Yeah. One of the, where was I going? One of the successes of the program is that we have been around. We're still around. A lot of programs, a lot of supports and services will come in, hey, we're doing this, it's great, we can offer that for you, and then all of a sudden they're gone. And then, when you're working with a population, youth especially, but also those men who isolate, who have been mistreated, who are mistrustful, who have been left alone, who have been rejected, all their lives, it doesn't do any good to swoop in, offer something, and then, exit, and then leave them hanging, right? So we have been around. We've been around since 2007, and we're going strong, and we've got street cred. We've got credibility with the guys in the youth, and that's a big deal. And we meet people where they're at in a, but we're back! Whoa, we're back. Don't be ashamed. Why don't you do right? My alter ego. Supports. We do a lot of supports. And here's how we do it. We build relationships like I talked about. We foster trust and respect. It's taken a long time to build the relationships that we have, both on street and online. It takes time, especially when you're working with folks who have been mistreated and they're very mistrustful. Ministry care, that's a common experience for a lot of our guys who are more survival or entrenched. And ministry care, at the best of times, that can be a really, really negative experience for folks. And so, we're working with that. We do one-to-one counseling, crisis intervention. We're a resource and referral hub primarily, right? So we're a trusted source. Go to them. Hustle's got the lowdown on this support, or our workers are able to navigate this system, and we've got that credibility out there, which is important. We do a lot of life skills. We did a lot of life skills when we were at Peers Vancouver, and we had that male exiting program, and it was the bulk of it. It was less about the actual exiting and more about reducing reliance or just being healthy in whatever you were doing. So life skills was hugely important. And goal setting and case management we continue to do as part of our support work. We have a support worker that's one night a week right now at the drop-in. It's not enough, but it's what we can offer. Evaluation. So with that accountability piece we talked about before, it's also super important to be accountable to the population that we're serving. So doing an evaluation and going back to the guys in youth and saying, hey, here's what we're doing, a little bit about you, who are you, what's your situation, and then what are we doing right, what are we doing wrong, what do you need, what do you want changed, right? Asking them to create their own program is really important. So we continue to remain accountable by doing that, and use the participant voices and experiences to develop the program in a way which is going to best suit their needs. And that's the where you can find our evaluation. I won't unpack it too much, but our most recent one was in 2010, and the red highlights are things to note. So on that line, 39% of our population identified as gay, 34 as straight, 24 as bi, and then there was a gay for pay category. Lots of people, we didn't have a gay for pay category actually, sorry, but it was what they wrote down. They had an extra, and they would write down, no, I'm gay for pay. So guys who are working, they present their sexual identity differently, a lot of them differently from their working to their personal life. So they're gay when they're working, but they're straight in their personal life, and that's a common experience, and maybe busting a myth out there. And then the 71% of our sample disclosing the online activity and presence, which really pointed to the fact that we needed to be online, we needed to be in their community, we needed to be where they were actually behind the wall on that one. And the youth who are exchanging sexual services, and they're creating identities and experimenting all over the internet. And that visible decrease in the stroll. There's always going to be the need for a physical stroll, but for those who don't know, it's downtown in Yaletown, but Yaletown used to be industrial, and it used to be a place where it was a lot more comfortable and a lot more anonymous. Now with Yaletown being built up and it's so residential and gentrified, that the guys have been pushed out of their own community. NetReach. Computers shaking hands. I love it. So we're online. Like I said, we're engaging with self-identified men in the industry, experiential youth in their virtual networks that they frequent, and finding new ways of health promotion. So as I said, we're on social networking sites. We're on, the usual suspects, as well as some very interesting sites, Vampire Freaks, Trans Queer Nation, lots of these sites where self-identified youth and other gender-varying folks are creating identity, and they're creating community, and they're taking risks, and they're experimenting, and they're having conversations that we definitely need to be a part of. We're also on dating sites, Squirt, Manhunt, Bareback RT, all the sites that are hookup sites and dating sites where guys, some of them have escort tabs where they actually can promote their services. Others, they're just out there and you message them and they talk about what they can offer and what they're doing. So, and some of these sites, it's interesting, we're still sort of finding our footing online, and it's only our third year, which is really young, and so that's why we're doing an evaluation. We figure on street, we have a pair of clean socks, to hand somebody, and it's just like, wow, the change that comes over somebody when they go, you care enough about me to give me a pair of clean socks, that's amazing. So when we jumped online, we're like, what's our virtual socks? What's the hook? What's gonna grab them and get them to engage? And we figure it's information, so we've just been playing with the types of information and the types of resources that we offer and provide. We just, Health Initiative for Men just created a new website last year, and we got a fancy page on it, so we're really excited. We could direct traffic to our fancy hustle page. And attached to it is a new blog where we put up safety tips every month. And the safety tips are more around, so you're thinking of working, what do you need to know? Or here are some of the things that that you need to keep yourself safe. The last few have been around the law, as Raven pointed out, because of all the ambiguity of the law and the Bedford decision, unpacking the law in user-friendly language so that guys can understand, or anybody who's reading it would understand the law, as well as the different models. That's our next one, is going to be what are the different law models internationally. You hear decrim, you hear Nordic model, you hear legalization. What does it really mean? And what does it mean if you're working? What if it means that you're everyday working? Because that stuff tends to be really up here. And for guys or anybody who's in the industry, sometimes it's just the day-to-day and they're down here. And they don't concern themselves so much with the law, right? So it's just trying to give them user-friendly language. So the rationale for NetReach, which we did talk about. So according to the UK Networks of Sex Work Projects, and they really like this, is the World Wide Web chat rooms, social networking sites, and portals are the latest and most rapidly expanding medium through which sex is sold globally. It's all online. It's all online. And that doesn't mean that online is indoor, off-street, and any different than survival, because some of the guys in the youth that we work with have better tech than I do. They've got the iPads, they've got the tablets, they've got the latest iPhone, and that's what they put all their money and energy into, but they still might be in survival. And when I say survival, it's just working to meet basic needs, right? Roof over the head, food, feeding a habit if there's an addiction going on, real basic stuff. Adult sex work, like I said, the demographics in Vancouver have changed drastically over the last 10 years. Historically, it was on street, it was in print. phone chats, escort services, brothels, but there's a marked increase in trading and selling sex online. That's on social networking sites, classifieds, your Craigslist, your Dutlists, your Backpage, dating sites, your Squirts, your Manhunts, your Bareback RTs, and those are tips of the iceberg. And there are private escort sites like your Canada Mail and private websites. I mean, the list is endless of the opportunities and ways that sex is being sold online. Experiential. Sorry, I gotta get the experimental out of this. Experiential youth. So the thing about youth online is that they're creating their own identities. They feel safer and secure and supported. It's that, it's not face-to-face, so you're behind a screen, you're protected. So you think, not necessarily. Predators are all over the internet as well, and they know exactly that they can do the same thing, and they can pretend to be whoever they want, right? So a lot of exploitation starts online now, and a lot of predators are online. But it's also a place where they feel that they have a unique opportunity to reach out to each other, and we have a unique opportunity to reach out to youth. Online communities, they're crafting and creating their own communities. They're experimenting with identities, with sexuality, in forums and chat rooms and blogs. They've staked a claim in the World Wide Web. We need to be there on their terms. It's a respect. We come in and we don't just come in and insert ourselves. We come in and realize that it's their conversation, it's their community. We ask if it's okay. We validate ourselves. We say, hey, this is who we are. We're Hustle, we're Health Initiative for Men. Don't just take our word for it. Go to our website. Here's my name. Go on my bio. I have a bio on the website. Check us out. The workers that we work with. And when I say us, Hustle is a team of myself as a manager. I have a NetReach and an Outreach worker who's also the community coordinator. And then we have a team of volunteers. One of the things we've been able to do at HIM, which is great, is expand our reach by engaging community and using a lot more volunteers in the support and the outreach piece that we ever were able to before. So that's a huge success and a benefit of being with HIM. We weren't able to do that at Peers. We were limited in our scope. So yeah, the asterisk meaning, we just want to be clear when we're talking about youth, that youth aren't in sex work. Under the age of 19, engaging in sex work is considered sexual exploitation, so youth are sexually exploited, even though, again, when I talk about that, a lot of youth don't consider themselves sexually exploited. They're exchanging sexual services, they're getting their needs met, they're having fun, they're partying, whatever, right? So it looks different. So we need to use their language, but we need to be mindful when we're talking about it. And the internet has proven to be an effective tool for youth to organize and create communities, but also a really alarming tool because it can be lured and forced into exploitation at a very early age.